During family dinner, my sister hit me and screamed, "You've got 10 minutes to get out of my house." Mom and Dad cheered. I calmly set a file on the table and said, "Actually, you all have 5. At dinner that night, my sister smacked me across the face and hissed, "You've got 10 minutes to get out of my house." My parents, Mom and Dad, actually clapped and laughed like it was some kind of show. I just grinned, reached into my bag, pulled out a thick file, dropped it hard on the table and said, "Then I guess you all have 5. I never imagined I'd be writing about that moment, but after everything that went down 6 months ago, I can't keep it bottled up anymore. My therapist keeps telling me that writing helps make sense of trauma, and honestly, after what my family did, I'll take any help I can get. But don't worry. This story doesn't end in misery. It's got a payoff that's more than worth the wait. My name's Rachel, I'm 31, and I make my living as a senior forensic accountant. Basically, I spend my days buried in spreadsheets and financial records, tracking down fraud, embezzlement, and every sneaky money trick people think they can hide. I've been doing this for 8 years, and it takes a sharp eye, endless patience, and a knack for spotting what everyone else overlooks. Turns out, those same skills would end up saving me, and exposing something I never expected. Let me paint you a picture of my family first. My older sister, Megan, has always been the golden one. She's 32, married her college sweetheart, Jason, and they've got 2 kids, Ella, who's 8, and Noah, who's 6. Megan's the social butterfly type, bubbly, charming. Exactly the kind of daughter my parents always brag about. She sells real estate, lives in a stunning colonial home in a fancy neighborhood, drives a shiny BMW, and posts non-stop about her picture-perfect life. Then there's me, the quieter one, the overthinker, the one who never checked their boxes. I'm single by choice, focused on my work, and perfectly content in my small downtown apartment. My parents, Charles and Diane, never exactly hid their disappointment. They still ask when I'm going to settle down and give them more grandkids, like Megan's 2 aren't already running the family show. The favoritism has been there since day one. When Megan wanted a pricey private college, they wrote the check without blinking. When I asked for help with tuition at a state school, I got a lecture about responsibility and loans. Megan's wedding? A $40,000 extravaganza. My graduation, where I earned my CPA with top honors. A night at Applebee's. But I swallowed it, built my own life, paid off every cent of my student debt, and became damn good at what I do. For a while I thought I'd made peace with it all. Turns out I was dead wrong. It started about a year ago when I noticed something off. My parents are both retired. Dad used to be a mid-level manager at a manufacturing company. Mom was a secretary at a law firm. They should have been living modestly on Social Security and Dad's small 401k. But suddenly they were flying off on vacations. Dad rolled up in a new truck, and Mom had diamonds I'd never seen before. At first, I told myself maybe Dad's investments had finally paid off or they'd inherited money from some distant relative. But then Megan started posting pictures from Hawaii, then Cabo, then Europe. Her kids were decked out in designer clothes, and Jason, the guy who manages a gym, was suddenly wearing a Rolex. Look, I know real estate can bring in good money, especially around here, but Megan's no luxury broker. She mostly handles starter homes and small condos. The numbers didn't make sense. My real concern kicked in one afternoon when I stopped by my parents' place and caught Dad mid-phone call. He was talking to someone about monthly transfers and being more cautious with the amounts. The second he noticed me, he hung up fast and said it was about his retirement account. Sure, Dad. That's when I knew I needed to dig deeper. And just to be clear, I didn't hack anything or break any laws. Everything I found was through public records, open data, social media breadcrumbs, and some old-fashioned observation. It's incredible what you can uncover when you actually know where to look. I started with property records. Megan and Jason's house had been bought 3 years earlier for $485,000, with a $150,000 down payment. Jason makes maybe $45,000 a year managing a gym, and while Megan does fine in real estate, public sales data showed she averaged around $65,000 annually. There was no way they could have come up with that kind of cash on their own. That's when I turned my attention to my parents' finances. They'd paid off their small ranch-style house long ago, but just 6 months after Megan closed on her new place, they suddenly took out a $120,000 home equity loan. The timing was just too perfect to ignore. I dug deeper into public filings, And that's when things got strange. I found multiple LLCs registered under different combinations of family names: Megan Holdings LLC, Diane Investment Group, Charles Property Solutions. None of these companies were large or flashy, but the repetition and pattern raised every red flag in my brain. The real breakthrough came one evening at work when I was reviewing examples of financial crime patterns. That's when I realized I'd seen something eerily similar before. It was what's known as a family loan laundering setup. Here's how it works. One family member takes out legitimate loans or liquidates assets, then loans that money to other family members for big purchases. The recipients don't actually pay the money back, or they make token payments, and the original borrower writes it off as a bad business debt, claiming tax deductions in the process. On paper, it all looks tidy. But here's where it crosses into criminal territory. If that money should have been reported as income, or if the whole scheme is built to hide assets and dodge taxes, that's fraud. And if any of the money itself was dirty to begin with, then you're dealing with money laundering, plain and simple. My suspicions were pretty strong by then, but they solidified at a family barbecue a few months later. I almost didn't go, but Mom guilted me into it, saying Megan had specifically asked me to be there. The minute I arrived at their house, I knew something was off. In just 2 months, the place had undergone a complete transformation. There was a brand new wooden deck with built-in seating, probably cost around 15 grand, plus a fancy outdoor kitchen with stainless appliances, and a swimming pool that must have set them back tens of thousands. Megan was giving a whole tour to the neighbors and family friends, smiling like a home design influencer. "We decided to really invest in our outdoor living space," she told everyone, waving her wine glass like she was on TV. "Jason and I believe your home should reflect your success and be a place where family can make memories." Dad stood there practically glowing, while Mom snapped pictures of Megan posing by the pool. Meanwhile, I was standing off to the side doing mental math. Between the pool, deck, kitchen, and other upgrades, they'd easily spent another $80,000, maybe more. Adding that to their new car, vacations, and lifestyle, I was seeing at least $500,000 worth of spending in just a few years, money that shouldn't exist on their combined income. I started eavesdropping more closely after that. Jason was chatting with his brother-in-law about buying a boat. "Megan thinks it'd be great for family weekends," he said. "We're looking at something around 25 to 30 feet. Dad piped up enthusiastically. "You know, Jason, there are great financing options for boats and RVs. Sometimes it's smarter to set it up through a business for the tax benefits." That made every alarm bell in my head go off. Dad had never owned a business in his life. He could barely manage his online banking, let alone structure tax-deductible entities. Someone had been feeding him that line. Later that evening, while people were cleaning up, I overheard Megan on the phone with someone, talking about quarterly distributions and keeping the proper documentation up to date. Those weren't words your average real estate agent throws around. She sounded like someone knee-deep in financial maneuvering. The puzzle pieces were finally lining up, but I still needed solid proof. That was when I decided it was time to stop poking around randomly and start running a real investigation, methodical, documented, airtight. I built detailed timelines of every major purchase and cross-checked them against all the income sources and financial events I could verify. The results were glaring. Every big-ticket expense lined up perfectly with either a new loan my parents had taken out or a sudden business windfall in Megan's records. For instance, that fancy European trip Megan flaunted online? It happened exactly 2 weeks after my parents extended their home equity loan by 35 grand. Jason's Rolex? That popped up on Instagram just 3 days after Megan bragged about a supposed $12,000 business bonus. From there, I got more systematic about tracking everything. I started taking screenshots of every social media post that hinted at money, luxury handbags, designer outfits, dinners at 5-star restaurants, spa weekends, first-class flights. Megan was practically doing my documentation for me. She couldn't resist showing off. Even the kids' private school, which cost more than some college tuitions, wasn't reflected anywhere in the public tax data I could find. The deeper I went, the more tangled the web became. This wasn't just a few tax write-offs. It was a coordinated operation built to look clean on paper, while funneling money through family channels under fake business pretenses. The shell companies weren't just sitting there, they were spending. Megan Holdings LLC had purchased the outdoor furniture I saw at their barbecue. Diane Investment Group had paid for trips labeled as business retreats that were really family vacations. Charles Property Solutions was paying contractors who worked on both my parents' and Megan's houses. It was actually pretty ingenious, which made me certain they hadn't come up with it alone. My dad didn't have the financial know-how to orchestrate something like this, and while Megan was sharp, she wasn't exactly running corporate tax shelters in her day job. Someone was advising them. That's when I started digging into Megan's professional connections. She'd recently partnered with a new financial advisor, someone who specialized in wealth management for small business owners. The firm's website was loaded with buzzwords like tax optimization, family wealth transfer strategies, and generational asset protection. Practically screamed, * creative accounting happens here. * I couldn't see their private client files, of course. I wasn't about to cross legal lines, but I could investigate the advisor himself. His name was Richard Blackwell, and what I found on him made my stomach turn. He'd been sanctioned twice by the SEC for shady client recommendations and had multiple complaints on record for overly aggressive tax strategies that the IRS had later rejected. That told me two things. One, my family scheme wasn't a fluke, it was being professionally guided, which made it far more serious. And two, they likely had no idea how dangerous it was to follow advice from a guy like that. For a moment I almost pitied them. Almost. But then I remembered years of being the forgotten daughter, the one they lectured about responsibility, while they bankrolled Megan's every whim. They'd built their little empire on favoritism and fraud, and I wasn't going to look the other way. The last piece I needed came from the most unexpected source. Megan's 8-year-old daughter, Ella. We were sitting off to the side at another family get-together while the adults chatted, and she was telling me about her new school. Mommy says I get to go to the best school because Grandpa and Grandma are helping me be super smart, she said proudly. I smiled and asked, "Do you like your new school?" She shrugged. "It's okay, but it's really expensive. I heard Daddy tell Mommy it costs more than his whole job money." That line hit me like a punch to the gut. Tuition for Ella and Noah ran close to $30,000 a year, money Jason couldn't possibly afford. And just like that, everything clicked into place. Jason's entire salary hovered around $45,000 a year, and even with Megan's real estate commissions there was no way they could legitimately afford private school tuition for both kids on top of their glitzy lifestyle. But if my parents were funneling money through those sham LLCs to cover education costs, it all started to make sense. It also meant they weren't just skirting taxes, they were committing a whole new level of fraud. Educational expenses paid through business entities are subject to strict reporting rules, and they were blowing right past them. That night, I went home determined to confirm my suspicions. I started digging into the private school's publicly available filings and board meeting minutes. Anything they were legally required to disclose. It took a while, but eventually I struck gold. The school's financial records listed the tuition for Ella and Noah Johnson as being paid in quarterly installments by Megan Holdings LLC. That was the smoking gun. The company Megan claimed was a legitimate business was, in fact, paying her kids' tuition. The IRS doesn't just frown on businesses paying for personal expenses while claiming deductions. They treat it like a full-on abuse of the system. By this point, I had a thick stack of evidence. Fake business entities moving money between family members, personal bills disguised as business expenses, unreported income funding major purchases, mortgage applications built on misrepresented income, false deductions to avoid taxes, even potential money laundering through carefully structured transfers. The total amount was closing in on $400,000 over 3 years, well into federal felony territory. Still, I didn't act. I wasn't ready yet. I wanted my facts to be bulletproof, and I wanted to know the full scope of their scheme before I made a move. A small part of me even wondered if they'd ever acknowledge how they'd treated me, if there was any chance they might change. So I decided to test the waters. It happened at Mom's birthday dinner, a fancy restaurant where everyone was relaxed and chatty. Megan was showing off photos from her latest getaway. Dad was musing about buying a new car. "You know," I said casually, "I'm really impressed by how well everyone seems to be doing financially. Megan, your business must be absolutely booming." Megan's face lit up at the compliment. "Well, I've been working with a new financial advisor who helped me optimize my business structure. It's amazing what you can do with the right guidance." "That's great. I replied, keeping my tone light. I've been thinking about expanding my own investment portfolio. Do you think your advisor might be willing to talk with me about my situation? The atmosphere at the table went cold. Megan glanced at our parents, and they all exchanged quick looks. Then Mom said, sugary sweet, "Oh, Rachel, I don't think Richard works with smaller accounts. He specializes in people who've already reached a certain level of success." The message was clear. Even when I was asking for the kind of help they'd handed Megan on a silver platter, they couldn't treat me like an equal. "I see," I murmured. "Well, maybe when I'm more successful." Dad patted my hand with a condescending smile. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Not everyone can be an entrepreneur like Megan. Your little accounting job is perfectly respectable for someone with your limitations." That was the moment the last shred of hope snapped. I knew then there'd be no redemption for them, no apology, no recognition of how they'd favored Megan while I built my life alone. They'd never treat me as anything more than the lesser daughter. So I stopped trying to save them from themselves and started preparing to hold them accountable. I began documenting everything in earnest. Every purchase, every trip, every new piece of jewelry. I cross-referenced every expense against the income one could trace. Piece by piece, I was building a case. When I traced the LLCs through business filings, it became obvious. They were nothing more than hollow shells. No employees, no invoices, no actual operations. Just empty names on paper used to shuffle money around. That realization kicked my investigation into overdrive. The documentation process turned into something close to obsession. I built intricate spreadsheets cataloging every social media post, every public record, every visible upgrade in their lives. If Megan posted a new handbag or my dad mentioned a renovation, it went in the log. I even started carrying a little notebook to family events, jotting down what people wore, what they drove, and any offhand comments about money. Nothing was too small to note. Parallel to that, I started researching case law, real federal prosecutions of family-based financial fraud. I read court documents late into the night, highlighting how investigators built their evidence and how prosecutors proved intent. I wanted to be sure that when I finally acted, my case would be bulletproof. Then came the turning point: Tyler's 6th birthday party. Megan had rented out a community center, hired professional entertainers, catered food, the whole 9 yards. The kind of kids' party that easily cost several $1,000s. I stuck around afterward to help clean up. And that's when I overheard a conversation in the kitchen that made my stomach drop. "Did you remember to get the receipt from the party planner?" Megan asked Jason, her voice low but firm. "Yeah," he said, sounding tired. "You told me to make it out to Megan Holdings, so I did. But I still don't get why we can't just pay for our son's birthday like normal people." Megan's tone turned icy. "Because Richard said if we handle expenses strategically, we can optimize our tax position. This party counts as a business networking event. I invited several potential clients. I'd been at that party. There were no clients, just family, friends, and a bunch of first graders in superhero costumes. If she was writing this off as a business expense, she was committing tax fraud right in the middle of a kid's birthday. But that conversation revealed something else too. Jason wasn't fully on board. He sounded uneasy, frustrated even. He was following instructions, but his conscience was starting to show through. That told me Megan was likely the driving force behind the whole operation, probably with pressure or encouragement from my parents. Over the next few weeks, I started watching Jason more carefully. During family get-togethers, he often seemed tense whenever money came up. He'd check his phone a lot, usually when Megan wasn't paying attention, like he was monitoring their accounts or trying to keep tabs on their finances. The stress was written all over his face. My suspicions were confirmed a few weekends later at another family barbecue. Megan was inside showing my mom her latest home renovation plans, and Jason and I ended up alone by the grill. "Rachel," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" His voice was low, cautious. "You work in finance, right? Do you ever worry about living beyond your means?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" I asked. He glanced around before leaning closer. "Sometimes I feel like we're walking on thin ice. Megan keeps saying everything's fine, that her business is killing it and we can afford all this, but the numbers don't make sense. I can't shake the feeling something's not right." For a moment I actually felt bad for him. He clearly knew something was wrong, but didn't have the tools to see how deep it went. Part of me wanted to warn him, tell him to start keeping records and protect himself before things blew up. But then I remembered. Jason had signed off on falsified mortgage documents. He wasn't innocent. Maybe not the mastermind, but definitely a willing accomplice. Financial stress is more common than people think, I said carefully. Maybe you and Megan should talk about scaling back on the big stuff for a while. Jason gave a short, bitter laugh. I've tried, Jason said quietly. But Megan keeps telling me I don't understand business finances, and your parents keep saying she's smart for investing in our lifestyle. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who thinks spending money you don't have is a bad idea. That conversation opened my eyes to something I hadn't fully grasped before. My parents weren't just passively enabling Megan's behavior, they were actively pushing it. They were likely the ones who introduced her to that shady financial advisor, and they were definitely the ones who provided the seed money to get the scheme rolling. It all clicked when I thought about it. My parents had always lived modestly, but appearances were everything to them. Megan's success made them look accomplished by proxy. They could brag to their friends about their daughter's big house and thriving business, all while knowing they were the hidden financiers behind it. The psychology of it fascinated me as much as the money trail. They were essentially buying vicarious success, funding Megan's perfect image so they could live out their own unrealized ambitions through her. Meanwhile, Megan was trapped in a performance of wealth that needed constant infusions of cash to stay believable. Jason was stuck in the middle, aware enough to feel uneasy but too involved to back out without admitting guilt and shattering the illusion their life depended on. And me? The so-called failure of the family. I was the only one actually succeeding. My life was stable, my income honest, my achievements earned. I wasn't wealthy, but I was free of lies. Still, because I wasn't flashy or loud about it, they treated my independence as proof of mediocrity. That realization hardened my resolve. They'd chosen deception over integrity and called it ambition. I was done letting them define me. It was time for reality to catch up with their fantasy. Over the next few weeks, I finalized my case. I gathered every public record, every screenshot, every time-stamped photo, and organized them into a timeline that told a crystal-clear story. I mapped out the flow of money between accounts, tied each payment to a corresponding business expense, and cited the federal and state statutes they were violating: tax evasion, mortgage fraud, money laundering, operating fraudulent business entities. Each one carried serious prison time, and the amounts I documented were far beyond the threshold for federal prosecution. The waiting was the hardest part. I knew I'd only get one chance to expose them, and I wanted it to land with maximum impact. I needed all the main players in one room, comfortable and overconfident, showing off the very lifestyle built on their crimes. That opportunity came when Megan called to announce a family celebration. She'd been named Agent of the Month at her brokerage, an honor no doubt inflated by bogus sales connected to our family's fake companies, and she wanted to host a formal dinner at her house. "It's going to be really special," she gushed over the phone. "I'm having it catered by that new upscale place downtown, and I've invited some of Jason's family too. I want everyone to see how well we're doing." The irony was delicious. She wanted to toast her fraudulent success in the very house bought with fraudulent money, surrounded by the people who helped her get away with it. And she wanted me there, the supposed underachiever, to watch her bask in it. I didn't hesitate. "I'll be there," I said. As the date approached, I felt a strange sense of calm. Months of work had led to this moment, and I was confident, calm, collected, and ready to let the truth do the talking. They had made their choices, and now they were going to face the consequences. The night before the dinner, I organized every last piece of evidence and made multiple copies. One set went straight into my safety deposit box, another stayed hidden in my apartment, and the final set went with me, tucked neatly into a manila folder that would soon take center stage at Megan's elegant dining table. But I didn't stop there. I also drafted something deeply personal, a resignation letter from my family. Not from my job, but from them. It was a simple, formal statement declaring that I, Rachel Morgan, was withdrawing from all family relationships and would no longer consider Charles, Diane, Megan, or Jason part of my life. I didn't plan to read it that night, but having it ready gave me strength. It was my emotional armor, my reminder that no amount of guilt or manipulation would make me back down. When I got dressed for what I knew would be our final family dinner, I felt something powerful, anticipation mixed with calm resolve. For the first time in my adult life, I held the power in a family setting. For the first time, I would be the one directing the conversation instead of silently enduring it. Megan had invited me to watch her bask in her own illusion of success, expecting me to feel small and envious. What she didn't know was that she was walking straight into the reckoning she'd built with her own lies. The irony was almost poetic. She thought she was hosting a celebration of her triumph over the family disappointment, but in truth, she was about to preside over her own unraveling. The final confirmation I needed had come, fittingly, from Megan's favorite pastime, social media. She posted everything, and I mean everything. There were pictures from inside her financial advisor's office, where you could literally see confidential documents spread across the desk. She posted humble brags with expensive receipts in full view, and one day, she went so far as to post a photo of a $25,000 check made out to Megan Holdings LLC, from my parents' joint account, captioned, "So blessed to have family who believe in my business dreams." That was the moment I knew I had them. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger just yet. I needed to know the entire scope of their operation and gather every ounce of leverage possible. Financial crimes, after all, live and die by their paper trails, and those trails can reveal everything. How long the fraud ran, how much money changed hands, and what penalties the culprits would face once the truth came out. Over the next 6 months, I built a rock-solid case file. I traced roughly $340,000 in questionable transactions between my parents' and Megan's household over a 3-year period. I documented unreported income, fabricated deductions, money transfers disguised as business expenses, and evidence of tax evasion. Every dollar was accounted for. But then I stumbled on something that truly made my blood boil. My parents, who once told me I had to learn responsibility by taking out student loans, had nearly lost their home because of Megan's greed. The home equity loan they'd used to fund her down payment had become a financial noose around their necks. Dad had called the bank twice to request payment deferrals. They were months behind and in danger of foreclosure. Let that sink in. They were willing to risk their own house so Megan could have hers, but they couldn't spare a dime to help me pay for college. The hypocrisy was staggering. Still, I waited. I wasn't impulsive, and I knew I'd get only one chance to expose everything. I wanted it to land hard, to leave no room for denial or manipulation. That chance arrived last month when Megan announced another one of her family dinners. It was the same house my parents had practically bought for her, and she was eager once again to show it off. Normally I'd invent some excuse, but this time I said yes. It was the moment I'd been preparing for. I should have known something was off the moment I walked in and saw the three of them exchange those knowing glances. Mom and Dad were already seated at Megan's lavish dining room table, sipping red wine from crystal glasses that probably cost more than my car payment. Everything about the setting screamed money. Money they didn't have. Dinner began smoothly enough. Megan had gone all out. Herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, and some kind of fancy risotto that looked straight out of a cooking show. She kept talking about her new hobby, going on about how she'd taken a gourmet class and how fulfilling it was to cook for her family. I smiled, said all the right polite things, even complimented the food, though it tasted like ash to me. Then Jason chimed in, grinning as he took her hand. "We're so excited for our upcoming trip to Tuscany. Megan worked so hard this quarter. She deserves a little break. Plus, the kids have never been to Europe." I forced a smile. How wonderful. That must be quite an expense. Megan waved a hand like the question was beneath her. When you're successful, you find ways to make it work. Some people just manage money better than others. The jab wasn't even subtle. Dad chuckled, Mom nodded approvingly, and in that moment it all clicked. This dinner wasn't about family or celebration. It was about reminding me of my place. They wanted me to feel small, less than a shadow next to Megan's glittering illusion of success. "Speaking of money management," Mom said sweetly, setting down her glass, "Rachel, don't you think it's time you started thinking about your future more seriously? You're not getting any younger, and that little apartment of yours isn't exactly building equity." I kept my tone even. "My apartment is fine, Mom. I'm building my career and my savings. Not everyone needs a big house to be happy." Megan laughed, sharp and mean. "Career? Come on, Rachel, you count other people's money for a living. That's not exactly upward mobility. I looked at her evenly. I solve financial crimes. I help put white-collar criminals in prison and recover stolen assets. It's actually quite fulfilling. She smirked. If you say so. But honestly, when's the last time you did something truly impressive? Something Mom and Dad could actually brag about? The air went still. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to break, to blush, to stammer my way through a deflection. This was the moment they'd orchestrated. The whole dinner had been a setup for my humiliation. I'm proud of my work, I said quietly. Dad sighed and shook his head. Rachel, we just want you to be successful. Look at Megan. Beautiful house, great family, thriving business. She's living the American dream. On borrowed money, I said before I could stop myself. The room froze. Megan's smile vanished, Jason shifted in his seat, and Mom's eyes went wide. Excuse me? Megan said, her voice low and dangerous. I should have backed down. I knew it. But something inside me snapped. Years of quiet resentment. Years of being dismissed and diminished. Years of knowing they'd risk their own home to finance Megan's fantasy life while leaving me to fend for myself. I straightened in my chair. I said on borrowed money, I repeated louder this time. This house, those vacations, that jewelry Mom's wearing. They're all paid for with loans and so-called business expenses that don't come anywhere near your actual income. Megan shot up from her chair so fast it nearly fell backward. How dare you come into my house and accuse me of whatever it is you're accusing me of? I didn't flinch. I'm not accusing you, I said calmly. I'm stating facts. Dad's face went red. Rachel, that's enough. You're being completely inappropriate. Megan works hard for what she has. Does she, though? I asked. Because from where I sit, it looks like she works pretty hard at spending other people's money. That was it. Megan's composure shattered. She came around the table so fast that I barely had time to react. Her hand cracked across my face so hard the sound echoed through the dining room. You've got 10 minutes to get out of my house, Megan snarled, standing over me with her fists clenched. 10 minutes, and then I'm calling the police to have you removed for trespassing. I pressed my fingers to my cheek where the sting lingered. But instead of feeling hurt or embarrassed, something inside me loosened. I felt free. Behind her, Mom and Dad actually started clapping like Megan had just scored a point in some twisted family game. Good for you, sweetheart, Mom said approvingly. Some people need to learn when they've crossed the line. Dad nodded vigorously. Rachel, you owe your sister an apology. This jealousy has gone far enough. I looked at all of them, the people who were supposed to be my family. Megan standing over me with rage in her eyes. Mom and Dad clapping like they were proud of her outburst. Jason shrinking back into silence, not lifting a finger to defend me. And I smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed the perfect justification for what they were about to do. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out the thick manila folder I'd been carrying for weeks. I think you all only have 5 minutes. I slammed it down on Megan's expensive dining table, next to the crystal glasses and fancy china. The room went dead silent. What is that? Megan demanded, but her voice had lost some of its earlier edge. I opened the folder and spread out the contents across her polished wood table. Financial records, bank statements, property deeds, photographs, shell company filings, tax returns, loan applications, and 50 pages of detailed analysis mapping every dollar that had passed between them over the past 3 years. This, I said evenly, is a comprehensive breakdown of what appears to be a multi-year tax evasion and money laundering scheme involving fraudulent business entities, unreported income, and systematic asset hiding designed to avoid federal and state tax obligations. The color drained from Megan's face. Dad stumbled backward and grabbed the wall for support. Mom's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. You're insane, Megan whispered, but her eyes were locked on the papers. Am I? I asked, pulling out one of the documents and holding it up. This is a bank transfer record showing a $35,000 payment from Charles and Diane Morgan to Megan Holdings LLC, dated 6 months ago. Megan Holdings LLC, according to state business records, has never filed any tax returns, has no reported business activity, and exists solely as a vehicle for receiving untaxed payments. I pulled out another sheet. This is a photograph you posted on Instagram. A $25,000 check made out to the same LLC with the caption, "So blessed to have family who believe in my business dreams." Megan Holdings LLC has no business plan, no license, no employees, and no legitimate business purpose. Jason had backed away from the table like the papers might explode. "This is harassment," Dad said, but his voice trembled. "You can't just spy on your family like this." "I didn't spy on anyone," I replied calmly. "Everything here came from public records, social media posts, and basic financial analysis. It's incredible how much information people leave out in the open when they think no one is paying attention." I slid a thick spreadsheet toward them. "Over the past 3 years, I've documented approximately $340,000 in suspicious transfers between various family members, none of which appears to have been properly reported for tax purposes. The pattern is consistent with systematic tax evasion, involving multiple parties across state and federal jurisdictions." Megan collapsed back into her chair, her face pale. This is just family helping family," she stammered. "There's nothing illegal about parents helping their children." "You're right," I said evenly. "There's nothing illegal about family members helping each other. But there's a very big difference between helping and hiding. It is illegal to set up fake companies to funnel untaxed money, to claim false business deductions, and to move funds around to dodge reporting requirements." I slid another document across the table and tapped it with my finger. "For example, this loan application for your house. It lists Jason's annual income as $45,000 and yours as $65,000. Yet somehow you made a $150,000 down payment. When the bank asked where it came from, you said it was from business savings in Megan Holdings LLC. The problem? Megan Holdings LLC has never reported $1 of income, never filed a tax return, never conducted legitimate business. That's mortgage fraud. And given the way the money was moved, it's also potential money laundering, because you used unreported income to buy property and disguised it as business funds." The silence that followed was suffocating. No one moved, no one spoke. Then Mom's voice broke through, soft and shaking. "What do you want, Rachel?" I actually laughed, a short bitter sound. "What I want? I wanted a family that treated me with respect. I wanted parents who didn't gamble their own home to fund my sister's fantasy life, while letting me drown in student debt. I wanted not to be slapped across the face and humiliated at dinner like some stranger. But since I can't have any of that, I'll settle for justice." "Justice?" Megan's voice cracked. "Rachel, we're family. You can't seriously be thinking about..." "About what?" I interrupted. "Reporting financial crimes to the proper authorities? That's not thinking about it. It's my professional duty. When I uncover evidence of fraud or tax evasion, I'm required to report it." Dad stumbled toward me, panic flashing in his eyes. "Rachel, please, let's talk this through. I'm sure we can work something out." I tilted my head. "Work something out? Like you worked out helping me with college? Like you worked out treating me equally all these years? Like you worked out humiliating me while you worshipped Megan's illusion of success?" I gathered the papers, slid them neatly back into the folder, and stood. "Here's what's going to happen. Within the next 48 hours, the IRS will receive a complete report. Financial analysis, supporting evidence, all of it. Considering the amount of money and how systematic this looks, I'd expect a criminal investigation to start within weeks." Megan was crying now, mascara streaking down her face. "Rachel, please. Think about Ella and Noah. They're just kids." I met her eyes. I thought about what they'll learn when they see that actions have consequences. That you can't build a life on deception and expect it to last. That their mother isn't the person she pretends to be. I walked toward the door, paused, and turned back one last time. "Oh, and Megan, you might want to call your broker. You're probably going to have to sell this house to cover your legal fees and back taxes. I'd suggest pricing it aggressively. You're going to need a fast sale." I looked at my parents. "Mom, Dad, you should probably contact your bank about that home equity loan. Once the IRS freezes your accounts tied to fraudulent transfers, you'll need to figure out how to make payments using your actual retirement income." Then I walked out without another word. I didn't look back. The next 2 days were a blur. I spent hours finalizing my report for the IRS, cross-checking every number, every transaction, every timestamp. I also drafted a separate report for the state tax authority, since part of the fraud involved state filings too. My phone didn't stop ringing. Megan, Mom, Dad, even Jason, all begging me to reconsider, to forgive, to forget. I ignored every call. There was nothing left to discuss. On Wednesday morning, I filed both reports. By Friday afternoon, I got official confirmation that both the IRS and the state tax authority had accepted my reports and opened preliminary investigations. That weekend, I took myself out to dinner at one of those fancy downtown places I'd always thought were too expensive. I ordered a glass of good wine and a steak that cost more than my weekly groceries, and for the first time in years I felt completely at peace. The investigations moved faster than I could have imagined. Within 6 weeks, the IRS issued audit notices to all 3 of them. Within 3 months, criminal charges were filed. Megan was charged with tax evasion, mortgage fraud, and operating fraudulent business entities. The maximum sentence was 15 years in federal prison, though her attorney was reportedly negotiating a plea deal that would involve massive fines, restitution, and a couple of years in minimum security. Mom and Dad were both charged with conspiracy to commit tax evasion and money laundering. Given their age and clean records, they'd probably get probation and community service, along with steep fines and repayment of every cent of unpaid taxes plus penalties. Jason avoided criminal charges but wasn't off the hook. He was hit with civil penalties for benefiting from the fraudulent mortgage, which meant paying heavy fines and losing much of what they'd built. Their picture-perfect house, the one my parents had helped them buy, was seized as an asset acquired through criminal activity. Megan and her family ended up moving in with Jason's parents, crammed into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. My parents lost their home too. Once their accounts were frozen, they couldn't keep up with the home equity loan payments, and within 4 months, the bank foreclosed. They're now in a senior apartment complex, living off Social Security and what's left of their pride. And here's the truth, I don't feel guilty. Not even a little. I gave them every opportunity to treat me with kindness and respect. I endured years of being dismissed, overshadowed, and made to feel small. I sat through countless dinners where my achievements were ignored and Megan's smallest success was celebrated like a royal coronation. But the night she slapped me and my parents clapped like she'd done something noble, that was the moment they showed me exactly who they were. They made it clear that I wasn't family to them, just a convenient comparison point to make Megan shine brighter. So I stopped playing the part they wrote for me and gave them the ending they earned. The fallout didn't just bring them down, it lifted me up. My report's depth and precision caught the attention of people at work. The IRS commended me for the quality of my analysis, and I was promoted soon after with a substantial raise. There's even talk of me joining the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. In the end, their corruption became the stepping stone to my own success. About a month ago, Megan tried reaching out again. She sent a long emotional email about how I'd destroyed the family, and how Ella and Noah were struggling to understand why they couldn't go home. She called me heartless, said real families forgive each other and work things out in private. I deleted it without replying. Megan never learned that respect isn't a birthright. It's something you earn. She thought family ties gave her the right to treat me however she wanted, no matter how cruel or unfair. She was wrong.